minute.
All right, you're up.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Selectmen's meeting was called to order at 5:13 this evening, and we went into executive session, and now we need to come out of executive session.
Move to come out of executive session.
Second.
First and second, all in favor, and there was no action taken.
3-1, Arlene.
Yes.
Okay.
Approve the August 22nd Selectmen's minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? 4, public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone who wants to address the Board of Selectmen with any issue that is not on the agenda. Okay. Seeing none. Sign the November 5th, 2019 special town meeting warrant, and this is a special town meeting warrant for Selectmen. Let's see, this is, need a motion for that.
So moved.
I'll second.
First and second, all in favor?
Just for the people at home, you might tell them what's on the warrant.
Would you like to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at the election on November 5th, we're going to have a special town meeting to.
Tracy,
replace-
can you turn it on? He said it's not on.
It's up top.
There we go.
Gotcha, thank you.
On November 5th, we're going to have a special town meeting to replace Stuart Barwise, who resigned back in September. And we have 2 candidates on the ballot. One is D. Michael Weston, and the other is Charles Sullivan. And they are both looking to replace that 1 seat. And that's the only thing on the ballot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy.
Okay. Follow-up discussion on the pickup and delivery of the kayaks on Jeffrey's Way. We've looked at this extensively, talked with our attorneys, and it specifically says in the town ordinance that there shall not be any business in a townway whatsoever. The selectmen can give an approval for a 3-day usage for a business, but 3 days only. And I don't see how, any way that we can approve this. If you
Stefan,
want.
please go to the microphone so folks at home can hear you.
So I did see that there's that ordinance in the books, but there's the trolley and horse-drawn carriage and pedicab exceptions are in the parking ordinance, which I'm not sure why they're, because they're basically doing business in the streets, right?
But that's not Goose Rocks.
It's the town of Kennebunkport.
They're in a separate ordinance that calls them out specifically and allows for those permits.
Okay. You know, we really looked hard at this to try to be able to do this, and we just can't do it.
We'd have to change
We
the
have
ordinance.
to change the ordinance. The beach use advisory, beach use ordinance also has that type of language in it.
There's nothing in, I read the whole thing, there's nothing in there, and it doesn't govern the right-of-ways, it only governs from the, what did they call it, the, vegetation or seawall down to the low tide line.
Right.
And there, I read through the entire thing, there's nothing in there other than dropping off, buses, trolleys and things like that, dropping off passengers.
Well, right at this present time, we can't do this because of actually the ordinance, the town ordinance is basically saying that we cannot do it. Would we like to do it? We would like to look at doing it, but right now we can't do it because of the language of the ordinance. But that's my feeling, my constituents. Did somebody want to make a motion of any sort or anything? They're more than welcome to.
Can I say, so I understand that, and I did read that ordinance, and I saw, that's the first thing that I saw, but then I knew that there were exceptions that the, selectmen at some point voted on to create, the most recent one being the pedicab exception, and basically you know, it's in a different ordinance. I'm not sure why. It's in the parking ordinance as opposed to the doing business on streets ordinance, which to me seems like it's in the wrong place. But there's a whole section in the parking ordinance, granting these exceptions to certain,
But that's
activities.
that's
Yeah.
a different ordinance.
Yes.
And you are correct in that. However, we do not have the power to grant the changes to the ordinance. Any of those ordinance changes would have to go before the voters. I mean, we could, it would originate here, but any of the ordinance changes in that respect would have to be voted on, you know, in November, which would be too late at this point for November, or in June.
Yeah. So, Lori, at the last meeting when I spoke in front of the board, you said that the selectmen did have the authority to,
Grant a permit.
yeah,
For 3 days.
the 3-day permit?
That's it.
Yeah, and when I was looking at the language, I didn't look closely enough at the 3 days, but I did see that they could grant a permit.
Okay.
But they're correct that they've been, through clarification with the town attorney, it's a 3-day permit.
Okay, so, so what's the process of having it put on the ballot? I understand it can't be put on the next ballot, but,
It would be up to the board to decide whether or not that's an amendment to bring before the voters in June.
okay.
And we'd have to
So-
look, we would have to look at that, but it's really a very difficult situation all the way around. I
The
just
beach
don't
use
see it.
ordinance guides a lot of what happens in Goose Rocks Beach.
On
and-
the beach, yes.
No, not just on the beach, but in the area as well. It governs the parking, how many parking spots we can have. And it governs a few other aspects of, you know, we're not allowed to, according to that, create any new business down there in the Goose Rocks Beach area.
I'm not sure that I have the beach use ordinance that I looked at is the one that's on the town website. It doesn't say anything about any of that. And it says specifically that it governs from the seawall down to the,
Low water.
There's
So
the,
Yeah,
I'm talking about
there's
the
the-
beach use agreement. This is a separate
there is an ordinance
document.
and an agreement.
Yes,
And they're kind of used, they sometimes use the words
okay, so they're two
interchangeably.
separate things.
Yeah.
But the agreement, and some of it does overlap and is the same, and some of it's a little different. And in the agreements that people signed, there was discussion about zoning and ordinance changes that might increase commercial activity.
Okay,
So I think that's what they're talking about, being concerned about.
okay. So, but people bringing kayaks down and unloading them themselves is no issue? I just want to make sure.
they're not, as long as they're not conducting business. That's the difference here. You are conducting a business. You are taking reservations, money is being transacted.
No,
No, then what are you
I'm
doing?
just dropping them off and picking them up.
And you're doing it for free.
No, but all that stuff is done off-site, all
It's,
the
but it's
business.
still a business. That's the discussion. You know, if you're taking money and taking reservations and dropping them off, whether you're taking the money at the point of your transaction of dropping off your kayaks, or you're doing it remotely, or you're doing it online, it's still a business and you're conducting commerce. And the ordinance specifically prohibits that.
Okay. But it prohibits the business, so if I rent kayaks to somebody and they bring them down there themselves, that's not me conducting business, right? I don't have to control where people.
That is
bring-
correct, yes. If you rented a kayak to me and dropped it off at my house, or I came and got it from you, and then I took it to the beach, no, that is not the same thing.
Okay, that's fine.
That's just an individual, we certainly wouldn't ask people where they got their kayak if they took it to the beach.
Okay.
I mean, I know it's not what you wanna hear, but I hope that
It's-
helps you in some
Yeah, sure, I
way.
mean, it's, in my opinion, it makes it more difficult for the town, but it, you know, it is what it is, I guess, you know, I mean, there's gonna be a lot more people bringing kayaks down the beach. You know, but it's, you know, in my opinion, so people that are, you know, renting houses, or even people that are staying at like the, Goose Rocks Resort there.
Tides.
What used
The
to be
Tides,
the
yep.
Beechwood. No, not the Tides, like what used to be the
Ocean
Beechwood.
Woods, Ocean
No,
Woods?
what used to be the Beechwood.
The beach.
Oh,
right,
Sandy
those-
Pines,
No.
or are you talking
No,
about the
the
condos
condos.
now?
Yeah, the condos.
Yeah, it was-
So a lot of those
yep.
are vacation rentals or,
Yes,
things
yes,
like
they
that.
are.
And so anybody that's staying there that wants to go kayaking at Goose Rocks basically has to, I have to bring them to them and then they bring them down to the beach as opposed to meeting me at the beach. So, it's an inconvenience for them, but, if they wanna go kayaking, that's what they have to do. But
I
there's gonna be a
don't,
lot more
yes, I don't
traffic.
believe the ordinance would stop you from dropping off kayaks on private property.
No, I know that, yeah.
Yeah,
But-
and then they would bring them
Yeah,
as individual. And I do understand what you're saying, and, ordinances aren't perfect, but, the ordinance certainly wasn't written to exclude you or anyone else from dropping off kayaks. But in the absence of this ordinance, we'd have hot dog vendors and T-shirt stands
understand
and
that.
other things
but
at the
that's,
beach.
my understanding was that there was like the like the trolleys, the petty cat, things like
Yeah.
that was my understanding, that was kind of the process was, okay, if there's a business that the selectmen, the general public, whatever, think is appropriate or beneficial to the residents, visitors, that there's a way to potentially make that happen. I get that you don't want, everything, all sorts of people all over the place all the time. I completely get that.
I'm sorry we couldn't help you more.
No, I
We-
understand.
Yeah.
We did
And-
really look at it really hard, and it was just, and we had some.
Unless there's some changes.
Yeah, had some legal counsel, and there's just no way that we can do it
Okay,
at this time.
all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so. Okay, consider request to make Grandview Avenue a one-way street running from Ocean Avenue to South Main Street. I drove down it.
Well, we did that to one of the other streets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go-
So just so you know, they could not make it tonight, and they've asked if we can postpone this to the 26th.
Okay,
Sure.
that's
I
fine.
won't be here on the 26th,
How quick
perfect.
did we say yes on that?
You
So
did
I think it would
You
be-
did tell me that, so we'll go ahead.
I couldn't remember if I had or not,
You
but
did.
Grandview, that's for the river.
So what were
property.
you gonna ask?
Yeah.
I think it would be good if people haven't had a chance to look at the street to take
Yeah.
a,
Yeah.
take
Yeah,
a
I'll
gander.
have
Right.
to do that, yeah.
Yeah. So, let's see.
View.
Are you doing?
Okay, number 8,
long as you
update
made it
from
running.
assessing on the market sales analysis.
Good evening.
Warner?
Warner Gilliam, Director of Planning and Development. Just to give you an update as far as where we're at with the market assessment. So we put out an RFP as a request for professional services for the market analysis. The due date for that's coming up soon, so the due date for that is September 20th. Our hope is that we get a number of qualified firms to give us a proposal. Our hope is that we want to get started in early October with this process, and our goal would be to have a recommendation before you October 24th for the board to approve.
So when you say a recommendation, you mean a company
That's
that
correct, a
we would
recommendation
choose
for the
to
company.
enter into a contract
Yep.
with?
And so, process-wise then, we'd expect this, would get started in December and continue on through the spring. Our goal would be to have, revised values available for property owners, by sometime in May, and then begin the, meeting process with folks that wanna meet with, whatever firm we decide to discuss their values if they choose to do so. And then that would put us on track to have, updated values finalized for the 2020, 2021 tax commitment. So,
Okay.
Thanks, Warner.
yep.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, consider a street opening permit for Habitat for Humanity on 36 Mills Road for sewer. So I have a question about that I just thought about. We're getting ready to
Pave it.
pave it.
Yeah.
Are they gonna do this? Oh,
Hey,
Snuck up on me.
I did. On behalf of Mike tonight, this was completed about a couple weeks ago, where Mike is a local project administrator for that project under the MPI. We took care of that. They were able to tie into a manhole that was at the edge of the road, so there wasn't too much of the road disturbed anyway. And obviously, the entire road is being overlaid anyway.
So they won't have to dig it up.
No.
It's all been taken
Oh,
care
I
of.
move we approve this. It's a very good thing.
Second.
second.
Second. All in favor? I didn't
Great.
see you sneak up. I was wondering why you were here
Yeah.
tonight.
Yeah, representing Mike tonight. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's
He's
gonna
gotta
s-
stay
one
for
more.
Dino
Yeah, one more, yeah.
Spignardi's,
Okay, consider, number 10, consider street opening permit for Dino, for Dino.
Dino Spignardi.
Dino
Dino's.
Spignardi.
Spignardi.
All right, 26 Windermere Place for a new water service.
Yes, it's actually gonna be at 314 Ocean Avenue. As we know, there's a 5-year moratorium on the road. There is no other way to get the water service over to that lot without, cutting the road. What Mike had suggested would be acceptable would be after a street cut, 2 1.5-inch lifts in the trench after it's been cut, allowing it to settle for the winter. And then in the spring, there would be a 50-foot grind, 1 inch deep on 25 feet on either side of the cut, and then be overlaid again.
So he's willing to do that?
He is.
Because I think we talked about that the last
Yeah.
No,
time,
that-
that we thought it'd be okay.
We had talked about Langsford Road.
Langsford Road.
Yeah, doing that,
And
and
they
we
were gonna
didn't
go
allow him
under.
to do it.
Right, they were gonna try and go under.
Right.
Okay.
Right, the
So-
option with that was that they were able to put a pole.
Is this a
onto the center.
replacement, or is this for a vacant lot?
This is a
This-
new,
Right, this is for a new service.
Okay.
Mike did talk to the board about it in terms of the moratorium and whether this would be an acceptable alternative.
Yeah.
And so he did go back to them and give them this option. They got pricing for it and have agreed to it.
Okay, well, they
Okay,
need water.
that's fine. So
I don't,
we-
I don't know. I'm not in favor of it.
Well,
I mean, we've talked about, if this was somebody's house that was there and we were gonna replace it, that's one thing. But, we have a moratorium for a reason.
Yeah, we do, we have a moratorium for a reason, but if.
And the
if-
road, it won't be the same.
Well, if Mike's good
these
with it.
people can't go
and-
without water for the
And
winter.
you're gonna do a 50-foot.
No,
grind.
it's a new construction.
Well,
If they
the
don't-
other option is they could put in a well,
Yeah.
which we know would be not adequate, which is why all those people wanted water service down there. I mean, I agree that I do not like people digging up the road, and especially when we've put the time in. This
when-
first person didn't own the property at the time, but they are paying a large portion of the infrastructure cost that was put in. And I think anytime we do have infrastructure that a utility or us has invested in, it does make sense to connect people to that. And they have agreed to put in the additional work in order to bring the road back as much as it can. It's not a perfect scenario, certainly.
I would move to allow them to get the water service.
I second it.
Have a first and second, all in favor?
Okay. One opposed.
One opposed,
One opposed.
which I get what you're saying,
I
and
understand.
I do understand what you said, but. Okay, award the, award the F-20 salt bids.
Still there, huh?
I'm still here, yes.
Still here?
Yes.
We had solicited from 3 different companies bids for this. We only received 2 back. One was from Morton Salt for $56.16 per ton.
Is
And
that
he's-
delivered?
Yes, it is, yeah.
That's a good price.
And then Eastern Salt Company for $59.90 per ton. We're recommending going with Morton Salt and awarding the bid to them for $56.16.
So moved.
Second,
First and second, all in favor?
Morton Salt.
And you have some liquid melt too, right?
No,
No?
we're just purchasing salt.
Oh, okay.
Well, the bid also had the liquid melt on there.
Oh, okay.
And so I thought that he also wanted to recognize that in case they needed it.
Yeah,
I had spoke with Mike this evening, and he said no.
He said no, they were all
Purchasing the
set.
salt,
Okay.
so-
Okay. All right, Thank you.
Chris.
Update on FEMA flood map appeal.
Werner.
Werner?
It's really getting busy.
It is.
It's gonna be full of all good news tonight.
Yeah.
What's that?
So, being a little sarcastic as I'm bringing all good news here tonight. So recently we received correspondence from FEMA regarding our appeal. Keeping in mind that this appeal is a joint appeal that was done by, there were 7 communities who joined in together to file this appeal. FEMA responded back and has denied the appeal, at this particular stage. What they have cited as a reason for the denial is an error in a calculation that was made. How the engineers explained it is that there was an error in a calc where instead of a particular number that should have been converted to feet had instead been left as meters, and so that resulted in some errors in calculations. So what I think is what's particularly disturbing about this piece is that we've looked at other appeals that FEMA has dealt with in other communities, and this has not been their particular practice. This is not how they've responded to communities in terms of as they come across a technical error, then basing a complete denial on an error in a calculation. So there's precedent has been set in other communities that they go back and forth in terms of conversation with a contractor to work through some of the technicalities. This was what we had seen had occurred in Rockland in 2015. So I'd say all of the communities and the engineers as well are a bit perplexed and confused as to why FEMA did not properly follow their procedure. Their procedure, as they spell it out, calls for consultation with the communities once these appeals have been filed, and so at this point we don't have an answer as to why they didn't follow their own procedure for that. Lori and I met with representatives from the other communities. We had a joint meeting a couple days ago, and also engaged the congressional delegation, in terms of reaching out to FEMA to try to find out what the issue is. As far as next steps are concerned, we do have the option to pursue what's referred to as a scientific resolution panel. This is essentially an appeal. The SRP process involves an independent group of qualified professionals that essentially review the data, review the decision that's made, and so we do have that as a administrative option for an appeal of this decision. At this stage, this was the direction that many of the communities felt that we were going to need to pursue, as well as having the delegation, try to figure out what happened with the process and why FEMA has chose not to follow their own procedure.
So,
Just to clarify, the scientific resolution panel in the documents, it says that they will FEMA determines whether we are qualified to meet the criteria to go through that process. So they could deny us that option even if we apply. And secondly, even if the panel agrees with our data, FEMA is not required, as I understand it, to adopt that decision.
so how about ransom? What do they say about all this?
Well, so this was, again, a lot of confusion as to why FEMA decided to take this approach. Ransom had reached out to FEMA, from what I understood, at least twice in a process, asking about whether or not they needed any additional data. FEMA had said nope, that they were all set. They didn't require anything additional, and then then we received this denial. So there's again kind of an overall confusion as to why this occurred. They are in the process of redoing the calculations for all the communities where they've gone back in, fixed the error, the mathematical error, and are rerunning the analysis to see what, if any, effect that has. So FEMA gave each community an example of what the differences were in terms of the calculation. And while in the graphic, you look at it and you can see, okay, well, there's maybe 3/4 of a foot difference in a calculation. The example that they gave us and used when we compared that with what was on the preliminary flood maps didn't actually change the base flood elevation at all, regardless of which calculation you used. It was, in the grand scheme of it, was a minor number that didn't have any bearing on the flood elevation, on the end result flood elevation.
And keep in mind that we argued several transects through the community, and each one had its own set of calculations. And so to say that one calculation meant that none of those transects were valid, doesn't make sense either.
Right, so we're interested to see, with the calculations rerun, if it actually has any bearing on the final elevations that the towns were proposing. That'll be a good piece of information to have as a rebut. We're not sure we're not sure what kind of process FEMA used. It appears to us that they found a technicality and then stopped the process right there. That's at least what it looks like, which is not how the process is supposed to go.
Well, I think we need to go ahead and request for a scientific review.
Do we need a motion for that?
Yeah, I think, do we?
I think it would be good to go on record saying that we
Yeah.
want to proceed with that scientific resolution
we-
panel.
Proceed with a scientific peer review.
Second.
First and second, all in favor?
Okay, thank you.
Warner.
Yep.
Thank you, Warner.
Good luck.
Okay, let's see. Accept a $250 donation from Cynthia Daly to the nurse's general account. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Do we have a
Second.
motion to accept?
I have a motion to accept her
And I'll second.
generous gift.
First and
Yes.
second, all in favor?
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Other business, Pat?
Yes, I do. I'd like to mention to the people at home, as well as those that are here, that Chems is celebrating its 40th anniversary with a party on September the 15th, coming up this Saturday, and it will be held at the Arundel Yacht Club. It's open, you drop in, stay as long as you like. They're going to have food for everybody. So it's from 11 to 2 p.m. at the Arundel Yacht Club, and we invite everyone to come down and join in, look at the historical memorabilia that we have, and we'll be glad to see you there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Is that it, Pat?
That's it.
I have none.
Ed?
I have none.
I have a couple of items. One is, I want everyone to make sure they know that Chalk the Port is happening this weekend, starting tomorrow at the Parks and Rec building on Recreation Way next to Consolidated School. We have nationally featured artists as well as local artists who will be chalking the pavement tomorrow and Saturday, and all day Saturday. There will be a lot of activities, including a 5K run to start the day off, a pancake breakfast sponsored by the Portside Rotary. And then in the evening, we'll be having, starting at 4 p.m., we'll have bands out there, 2 different bands, and luminaries, so you can see the finished product of the chalk. There'll be carnival games, there'll be a beer tent sponsored by Batson River, and lots of fun and activities. So we encourage everybody to come out. The proceeds will benefit the Kennebunkport Parks and Rec Scholarship Fund. So don't miss out on Saturdays especially. So second item. I did, as you know, taxes were due on Tuesday of this week. And I did have an individual who was hours late in paying his taxes. And he came to see me the next morning and was concerned about not having any leeway or grace period. He had some complications in his life that prevented him from being able to pay his taxes on the due date. I explained that as tax collector, I did not see that I had that authority to offer a grace period. Under state law that's set through the town meeting process, the interest date and the due date. I did confirm, he thought that I did have some discretion there, and I did confirm with Maine Municipal Association, they agreed. They said if the town meeting wanted to set a different date that interest starts, then we could have a grace period. But I said I'd certainly bring it up to the board and see if they think that we should be offering a grace period.
I'm quite frankly not interested in changing the way we do business.
Nor I. I mean,
Yeah, you
We've
get your
got the
bill
bill
a
a
month,
month.
yeah,
Yeah,
you got
month
30
to pay.
days.
yeah. So I'd say no.
You want to vote on that?
I'm just, nope, I don't need a vote unless you want me to take a different direction.
No.
The
No,
the
not
only
at
thing I
this
would
time.
say is next year, put it 5 days sooner. Instead of, like, instead of the 21st, put it on the 16th. That's a 5-day grace period.
There you go.
Well,
It's one way to do it.
No, I think we're fine. I think we're fine as we are.
do you have anything else?
I have
Not the
one.
IRS, we don't charge that absorbent interest rate.
Right, exactly.
The last issue is, as you know, through the Growth Planning Committee's survey, we found that the environment and energy efficiency, things of that nature, are a top concern for the residents of Kennebunkport. This past summer, our intern worked on our carbon footprint and our solid waste issues and watershed testing, water quality, and how we might move forward. The other concern we have is that with sea level rise and our location, that rising tides and surge in storms could have dire effects for portions of Kennebunkport. And so Werner and I have certainly been attending various sessions throughout the state and talking to our neighbors about how we can better plan for coastal resiliency. So this summer, we started meeting, I picked the 6 towns on the coast that I think are most like us. So Kittery, York, Wells, Gunkwit, Kennebunk, and Kennebunkport. And we met about these issues about energy efficiency, resiliency, coastal impacts, and with our Southern Maine Regional Planning Commission. The communities all are sharing in these same concerns, and a lot of them have committees that they've established. They're on different parts of the path on that. Some are further ahead than others. But we met again this week, and there is a commitment from the managers of the 6 communities that we would like to have a shared position through Southern Maine Regional Planning Commission. And that funding would then help to be our share towards some additional grants. One of the grants would look at the economic impact of these rising seas and coastal impacts. So from a tourism business, how we help get businesses more resilient and back up and running, what the impact will be from taxable valuation of land and how we might better address that, as well as our own infrastructure and how we should make it more resilient in the future, or how we might need to look at planning for main streets that might be near the water and where that may be in the future. They thought that we might be able to leverage at least $150,000 in additional grant money. Plus, this person could work on each community's own issues as well. What they've come up with a budget, and the budget for the 6 towns would be about, we're thinking $90,000 for a 2-year period, $90,000 each year. If we split it 6 ways, it would be $15,000 a year, which to me would be great leverage. We could not afford to hire somebody on our own, or if
Yeah.
we did, I'm not sure we could keep that person busy. And it's one of those areas where we need some additional expertise. They would also leverage a person who's already working for Southern Maine Regional Planning. What they are going to do, Southern Maine Regional will write up a letter that you can consider in the month of October. about whether or not we might begin funding that in the month of January and then put it in as part of our process. So I explained that, and the other towns are in the same place, that the budget process doesn't begin until July. But they are all looking at whether they have some contingency funds that they could fund a 6-month portion of it, so $7,500, in order to not have to wait a more time period before they move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea,
Yeah,
absolutely.
makes sense.
And we have some in the somewhat, right, since you're
Right,
young.
right now.
That's right.
Right now, till
So no action right now, but I just wanted to bring you up to speed on that.
Anything else? No?
I move the treasurer's warrants.
Second?
First and second, all in favor?
Motion to adjourn.
I second that.
First and
I was just
second,
playing with them.
all in favor? Thank you, everybody. You guys have a good night.